Welcome to Canning What You Grow. My name is Holly Baird. This production is put on by the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Well, today we're going to do some pickling, and we're actually going to pickle asparagus. And pickling is usually the first thing that somebody does when they begin to can. They either begin pickling or they make some sort of jam. My first item I ever canned was actually just regular cucumber dill pickles from our garden. I bought this asparagus. I bought it at Costco, and I do like the warehouse stores, whatever you want to call them. You get really good deals on produce there, and they also, I've noticed, Costco sometimes will have like in-store coupons, so that's kind of cool too. But anyway, I got 4.5 pounds of asparagus, and we cut them down to, well, where they're gonna fit into a quart jar. And so you just take one, you kind of slowly cut it. This one's actually kind of short, but yeah, you go ahead and you do the basic measurement, and you just want to get them all cut down. You also want to make sure your asparagus is basically at room temperature, so maybe leave it out of the fridge for half an hour to an hour or so. The very first thing you want to do before you even start prepping your items for canning is you want to get your water bath going. It can take a while for that to begin to boil. We fill ours up about 3/4 to almost full, and what we do is once we start to put the jars in, we take water out. Some people do the opposite, they add water, but we feel adding cold water to hot water and that fluctuation in temperature may cause jars to break. So obviously we don't want that. So when you're pickling, you want to make your brine, and sometimes when you're pickling you have to blanch stuff. In this situation we can just put the vegetables in raw. So already in my pot here I have 3 cups of water. I'm going to add 1.5 cups of just white vinegar. And when you're using vinegar for pickling, you always want to make sure that it is at 5% acidity. Then we're going to do 1.5 cups of apple cider vinegar. Yeah, well actually, yep, we're right on. So that was good. Okay, so let me just put that off to the side there and put that in there. So we got the water, the white vinegar, and the apple cider vinegar all set to go. Now you also want to add some spices, and so I have pickling spice. I have 3 tablespoons of that, and then 2 tablespoons of pickling salt. You can find pickling salt. I found this at the grocery store, local hardware stores if they sell canning jars. And pickling salt it's a specific kind of salt. Now, when you buy pickling spices from the grocery store, sometimes they have cloves in them. So you want to remove the cloves, otherwise whatever you're making isn't going to taste right. It's going to have just kind of a weird taste. So check your pickling spice to make sure it doesn't have cloves in it. If you know of a spice store in your area, or there's someplace you prefer to buy spices online, you know, you can always check, but for, you know, about 5-10 minutes, whatever, you can just pick your spices out. So that goes in there. Now I'm not going to add the garlic to the brine. I'm going to add the garlic to the jars, and that is kind of as a needed basis. We like our pickles more garlicky. Maybe you don't like them garlicky at all. So I'm going to get this brine on the stove, and I'm also going to put my jars in the canner so that they can get nice and hot. Now before we are going to put the jars into the canner, what we did is we basically preloaded our jars, and we just put, our asparagus in there, figured out what height it needs to be, and then we loaded the asparagus into the jars so that we have an idea once it's time to pack the jars to know how many jars we need. And at this point we need 3. We're going to do an extra one. We're actually going to do one of these 24-ounce jars just in case we have some extra or something, shifts or whatever. Also, if you have, you're going to have the ends of your asparagus as well, you can use that. You can make that into an easy soup. You just cook your asparagus down. You add some peas, some garlic, onion. You could cook it down in some chicken broth, and then you want to go ahead and puree, and it makes a nice little asparagus soup for you. So let me go ahead and get this on the stove. So we have the brine, and it's just about to come to a boil, and that's exactly what you want. You just want to stir it and let it boil for about a minute, and then you can get your asparagus into the jars and then get the brine on top. And you want 1/2 inch headspace or 1/2 inch headspace. I will be adding garlic to each of the bottom of the jars, that way so we can get that nice garlicky flavor. So let me go ahead and, oh, also, we always do our lids. You want to make sure your lids are, you want to make sure they're hot so you can soften that rubber ring that's on there. So we always just put it in a little pan on the stove, heat it up for about a minute, and then go ahead and they're ready to go. Okay, so I'm just getting the asparagus put in here. We have this pan of hot water so that we can, well, that's hot, so that we can keep our jar pretty warm. And like I said, you just want to pack them in there, and you need to have 1/2 inch headspace with the brine. So now we're going to get the brine in there. And like I said, we need 1/2 inch of headspace. We're going to use our headspace measure for that. Now we just take precautions because we don't want to, you know, have any situations where we have to deal with, like I said, you know, some sort of broken jar, because it is a pain, and especially when you're doing something like asparagus, which is a little bit more sometimes expensive. So all right, here's my measure for the headspace. What is it, the second one down? Yes. Yep. Okay. All right, so we got the lid on here. You use your wand, magnetic wand, and then you just want to finger tighten these. You don't want to over tighten them, just a little finger tighten like that. And then we're going to go ahead and get that into our canner here. There we go. And the water's boiling, so we're going to go ahead and get our lid on and start the timer now for 15 minutes. Okay, so our timer just went off, so we're going to go ahead and remove the jars from the canner. You just take your lid off there and take your canning tongs here, jar tongs, and make sure you got a good grip before you transfer it over to wherever you're putting it. And we always just put it on a towel on our table here, so that way we know that it's gonna, you don't want to put it directly onto a table, you want something in between. All right. So now you want to just leave them, we leave ours overnight, 24 hours, and then we check the seals, and I had showed you in our previous video of the do's and don'ts. You want to make sure it's not going to make that ping noise. If it's made that ping noise and it's been 24 hours, you can go ahead and reprocess it. If you don't want to do that, you can just go ahead and put it in your fridge, and you want to eat it within about a week or so. So as you could see, I was working hard to get the asparagus into the jars quickly so that the jars can stay hot, so that we don't have to worry about them breaking in the canner. It's nothing to be afraid of. It can happen, and it's happened to everybody, whether if you can, you know, 1 year or a bajillion years, it's happened to everybody. But that way you can take preventative measures. If you have a way that maybe you keep your jars warm while you're getting them ready to get ready for canning, just leave that into the comments so everybody else can learn from each other. I'm Holly Baird, and this has been Canning What You Grow.